What is up, y'all? Welcome back to the Accelerate Your Life podcast. I am your host, Mallory Marks, and welcome to, I guess I should call this episode 2. I know I said the last episode was going to be a little baby episode and not technically episode 1, but shockingly, I ended up talking for a whole 9 minutes when I thought it was going to be maybe 2. And so it pretty much was episode 1, which is probably going to be the theme of this podcast. I actually already recorded this once and it ended up being a half hour. And I was like, there was no reason for that to be 30 minutes. So we're going to attempt number 2 here. And it's probably still going to be a half hour. But I am going to make a promise as well. And that is going to be that this is a no edits podcast. Partly because I'm lazy, but partly because my thing is I just want to be raw and real with you guys. If you follow me on social media, I always try to show up that way. I try to show you the good, the bad, whatever. So, there's gonna be a lot of bad of me messing up. There's gonna be a lot of bad of me saying and and all the filler words. I may re-record the whole thing, but that's on me to waste another half hour doing that. Because I started to try to trim the last one, I was like, let me get some of this. This room was also getting so hot, and I was mentally checking out because I was sweating and I was just not making sense at the end. So I was trying to cut it. I was like, no, you know what? We said raw and real, so we're gonna start over. But anyway, welcome to episode 2. I am so happy for you to be here. And I think that for episode 2 here, we do need to just lay out the foundations of me and my background and all that good stuff so that you know who the heck you're listening to and why you should trust me. And I did say on the last episode that I don't want this to be an only health and fitness podcast, but we are going to definitely talk about it because it is a big key part of, I think, accelerating your life. As you guys know, that's my big belief, why I named the podcast this, why my coaching company is called Accelerate Athletics. It is through, I think, starting with foundations of health. You see how many times I'm already saying we're not cutting out. But starting with foundations of a good relationship with food, good relationship with your body, the way you fuel yourself, et cetera, that is where we begin to accelerate your life. So with that, you need to understand my history with health and fitness, my knowledge with health and fitness, why you should trust me. Can you relate to me? The things I struggled with, yada, yada, yada. I always ask my guests. I've literally had this podcast for 2 days. I don't know where I was going with that, but I have, when I've been a guest, always like to have been asked what gives you the right? And I will always ask my future guests that. I promise you that now. And I think I need to ask myself that. What gives me the right to be here talking to you guys? So that's kind of what this episode is going to be for, is background of my health and fitness journey, how I got to where I am today. But really less about my qualifications and any of that, but more about what I went through and my struggles as well, because I had to endure a lot of pain in order to get where I am. And some of you guys may be going through that pain, different pain, similar pain as well. So either I hope this resonates with you, relates to you, helps you maybe see that there is another side, or even if your pain's different, you see that it is normal to struggle. It is normal to struggle. We want to change that normal, especially when it comes to, I think, having a poor relationship with food. And that's a big mission in my world for, that I want to have in the world for a lot of women, is changing that. So let's dive into it. Actually, ADD wise, I had a few housekeeping things I did want to say. Number 1, if you are listening to this on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on whatever, awesome, love you, so glad you're here. If you are a visual person though, this is on YouTube. I know no one will probably ever watch it on YouTube. That is okay. You're not missing anything. I'm just in my office, me, myself, and I, but it is on YouTube if you want to hang out there. But yeah, okay, diving in. So I think that one thing, we have to start at the very, very beginning, right? Which is remembering. I was trying to remember because I actually took some notes and outlined this a little bit, which I'm not even going to look at that because I think that's why I went on such a tangent last time. And I'm not going to typically outline notes for these podcasts because I'm a pretty off the cuff person, but I wanted to kind of sit down and outline it because I don't think back a lot or often to what really triggered stuff for me. And triggered, when I say triggered, triggered kind of going down the rabbit hole of having a poor relationship with food, because I actually didn't struggle with it for a long time. I mean, as far as I could remember. So I really had to think about, when was the first time I was really conscious about my body, conscious about what I was putting in my body, how it affected that, kind of got obsessive with it. Because for a lot of people, I know it can start really, really young. And I do think that for most of us women, not everyone, and if you're one of those that are lucky enough to really have never struggled with your body image relationship with food, I'm so happy for you. And that's really, I hope, where everybody can be. But I do think most of us do. Now, the story of how we get there is a little bit different. Some, I think, start really, really young. Some, maybe it triggers, later in life. I was a little bit more later in life. I really don't remember, um, being stressed about it too much in middle school, like maybe high school, it started to kind of happen. But I will say, I think I'm really lucky with how my parents, specifically my mom, was with dieting and food and things growing up. Um, and I will preface all of this too by like anything I say, I do like because I think we, again, especially as women, when I say we, talking about women, like a lot of the relationship with food and exercise and all of that we do get, and the way how it does develop to be probably comes from how we hear our mom talk about it, how they talk about their body, their relationship with food, etc. And so anything I do say that like maybe it was the way my mom or parents influenced me, I want to make sure it's very clear that like my parents are freaking awesome. My mom is awesome. And I know nothing came from like a negative place. She didn't, know that it was going to affect me in any way that it did. So I want to say that, but for the most part, I actually don't think there really was much that kind of affected me negatively in that regard. I mean, I do remember my mom maybe doing like Weight Watchers and talking about losing like 5 pounds. But it was not a heavily emphasized thing. Like I was never around constantly, a mom that was already which my mom was in great shape. So like maybe she just also didn't really worry about it. But like I know a lot of people have the mom who is in great shape and also just talking all the time about how they need to lose weight. And of course, how does that make, their daughter feel of like, oh wow, like she looks great and she's already like worried about it. So I need to worry about it, et cetera, et cetera. I luckily didn't have a lot of that. But I do remember in high school starting to kind of like, body check every time I walked past a mirror, checking in a bathing suit, making sure I was like looking okay, yada, yada, yada. And I think the first kind of core memory I have of like a diet is doing a fruit and nut diet I think it was high school. What does that even mean, bro? I don't know. Eating just fruit and nuts. I think I made it like 2 days. But point is the concept of dieting did get there pretty fresh at some point relatively early. But I was the pickiest eater ever growing up. So there wasn't really a lot of option for me. Like there was pretty much two things I would eat: peanut butter and jelly or chicken nuggets, or I didn't eat. So I wasn't conscious about health. Let me tell you that. I was not eating any vegetables, would not touch the vegetable. I was just such a picky eater. So again, it just wasn't really something I dealt with growing up till college. College really changed everything. And I don't know what switch flipped. I always say what switch flipped. It truly went from 0 to 100. In fact, I remember, and it didn't really flip until sophomore year of college either, because even freshman year of college, I remember actively thinking in my head, I'm so glad that I will never deal with anorexia or bulimia or eating disorder. I have no idea how people do that. How could you not eat? Like, I remember thinking that, and what an ignorant thought. So ignorant, because it sneaks up on you, and it is not something that people are consciously choosing to be. I mean, yes, you are making, I guess you could argue that, the conscious decision to not eat or to, purge or whatever, but it's kind of the same thing with alcoholism or, being addicted to drugs. It really, addiction is a disease, right? It's similar. It's a compulsion to, restrict or to do whatever. And it's not a choice that, again, it's an active, you are making the active choice to that thing, but it is a compulsion. And I just, again, remember being so ignorant and thinking like, I'll never deal with that. And then one day, what do you know, it just hit me. Like, I think maybe for a lot of people it's a sliding scale, but I just don't know what it was. I just became obsessive. I do think it partly aligned with me. I went abroad. That was when I became less of a picky eater, because I was kind of forced to try new things, realized I liked new things. And then I had this whole new world of all these foods I'd never eaten. And I was like, what do I do with this? How is this going to affect my body? Kind of probably started to gain weight freshman year. Had a great old time, lots of chicken tenders after drinking. And I did watch my body change, I think, that first year. And that was probably part of it as well, because I remember sophomore year is just switched. And all of a sudden I was so conscious of everything that I was eating. I was reading about diets. I was like starting to mentally count calories. I know there's people listening that can relate to this, but when you are thinking throughout the day of everything you've eaten and trying to add them up in your head, and you'll add them all up and you'll be like, okay, all right, I got to this point. And then 5 minutes later, you'll do it again. And you have to keep playing the mental gymnastics of adding it all up to like, and just like making sure the number is still okay. And I don't know if that makes sense to anybody. I just remember it's like, it'll be 5 minutes later and I'm like, I haven't even eaten anything different. I'm re-adding everything in the day. Yeah, that became my life. Alongside another little point I remember is hearing about keto and getting on that train. And like, I didn't even know what the hell keto was. I just like heard about it, read an article and was like, okay, I guess we're eating just fats, no carbs. I literally went, I will never forget this. There's going to be some like core memories in this podcast, and core memories usually has a positive connotation. These are negative core memories. But a negative core memory of making me and my boyfriend at the time pasta, gnocchi, gnocchi, like the little potato pasta things. I made gnocchi, and if you're on YouTube, you can see me doing air quotes because it was not pasta. It was mozzarella cheese balls. And then you like, I don't even cooked them, fried them, I don't know. And that was the pasta. And then you put pasta sauce on these a bowl of mozzarella cheese balls and ate that like pasta. I'm what the hell? Like who thinks that's healthy? Me at 19 years old, apparently thinks that that is better than eating carbs. And I could go on a massive tangent about that. But that right there is what is wrong with so much of diet culture. And I think I kind of skipped ahead. Something I wanted to say in the early parts of like my childhood is that while I luckily was not necessarily around a mom who was like talking negatively about her body or, negatively about food. I also love you, mom. This is not your fault. I think that, this was again, like you probably weren't taught this either. And I don't know that I would have consciously taught my kids this in the future had I not been who I am with health and fitness, but I don't think I was taught the why behind food, right? You're kind of taught this food's good, this food's bad, eat vegetables, eat dessert, eat or don't eat dessert, like, or don't eat too much of it, and it's good and bad and it gets moral value, but you don't know why. And so all you have with it is this moral value. I 100% just want an ADD tangent about there because I was talking about gnocchi made out of cheese, but we're going to circle back. But I don't think we don't have the concept of why foods are labeled this way. And I don't think food should have moral value anyway. There are obviously foods that are more nutritious for you and better for you. And foods that don't hold as much nutritious value doesn't mean they're good or bad. But that's exactly the point, is that nobody taught me why it was good. Oh, it was good because it has nutritional value, or this is bad because it doesn't. So I missed completely that understanding. And then later in life, when you start to hear these diets and these trends, it's like, well, I don't know why having cheese as balls of pasta instead of pasta is not good. Why is like, because I don't understand that cheese or carbs, like I don't understand that there's like more nutritional value or less nutritional value. So to me, it wasn't logical. I didn't understand why having balls of cheese was nowhere near better than having pasta. I was just like, oh, well, I learned that having lots of carbs is bad, so then this must be good if I'm reading about it. So I think that education gap is just, that is what this all comes back to, and why I'm so passionate about what we do, or why I do what I do, is just to fix that education gap. Okay, you know what? We might have some edits because that just had a little jump there, but if I ever do, I'm gonna tell you why, okay? Why I just had a massive, like, I don't know if I just, when I talk too long and I get like overheated and I just like, I thought I was gonna almost pass out there for a second. So anyway, dramatic. I am dramatic. You're gonna get drama on this show. Anyway, so I also realized I was gonna go on a major tangent. So we're gonna recuperate back to the point of this being my little journey. So honestly, I will allow that to pretty much sum up the rest of college and my relationship with food. I think that I realized it was just getting really, really dark when honestly it really majorly impacted the relationship I had in college, like me and my boyfriend at that time, because I was constantly asking for validation that it was like okay that I ate something, like texting and asking like, I just ate this, I just ate 100 calories of this, I just had a donut, oh my gosh, I'm so upset with myself, like, do you promise I'm still okay, do you promise I still look okay? Like, that is so heavy to put on a person, so heavy. And I think over time that just completely wore us down, because who would want to be with someone who doesn't have like enough confidence in themselves? And that was when I realized, oh my gosh, like this is dark. And I knew I needed to start to pull myself out of something, but it was just tough at that point still too, because I did have a lot of friends in college as well who kind of had very similar struggles and relationship with food, which at the time felt nice and validating to have, okay, someone else that was struggling the same way, but we would kind of feed off each other. And I think in some ways it was a negative because it made me feel like it was okay to feel that way. And then I didn't feel as urgent to fix it or like, oh, I don't have a problem. Like, I don't have a problem. It's normal to try to purge. Because by the way, when I said a little bit ago how I always thought I would never have an eating disorder, I never fully blown did, but and I don't know that I've ever admitted this out loud, but I definitely had times where I went and tried definitely tried to purge or whatever and just like physically didn't or couldn't. But there were some dark days. There were definitely some dark days. And at this point too, I guess from that just the exercise side of things, I'm definitely still doing a lot of cardio. I did eventually get into lifting more towards the end of like middle, maybe junior year of college, sophomore, junior year of college. Shout out to my boyfriend at the time for that, because I think he got me into it. So honestly, bless his heart, he struggled. He dealt with me with a lot. And I gotta give him some props for some of the places I am now. But yeah, I got into lifting, started to see what that could do. And I still didn't have the nutrition component down though, but I knew by the end of college I was like starting to be onto something. But I just didn't know, like, I just still was, the weight training changed my life, but I knew I was still struggling with my relationships, long story short. But I knew I wanted to like figure that out. And that was when I knew I didn't want to go into kind of my majors anymore. And I started going to the library at the end of college just to study, nutrition and get my nutrition cert, just to study for my personal training cert. I was going to go back to school to be a dietitian. I was already so out on the majors I was graduating with. I was like, well, it's too late now to change it, but I'm finishing with this, but I'm going to go right back to school. And that was the game plan. But COVID happened and I was just stuck at home for a long time. And so all I did during that time was a ton of trial and error and so much research, and really started to uncover the truth behind nutrition. But I absolutely went through this phase, and I want to share this because I think this is where a lot of people get stuck, where you become aware of what you didn't know before. There's 4 stages, and this brings me to kind of something I think about a lot, which is the 4 stages of competence, if you've never heard this model. But the first stage is unconscious incompetence. And this is where you are not even aware of what you don't know. It's like the ignorance is bliss phase. That's kind of like where I was when I was describing like my high school time. Like, I just can't even care about nutrition because I don't even freaking know anything about it or that I'm doing anything wrong. And then the next stage is conscious incompetence. And this basically means now you're aware of all the things you don't know and you don't know how to fix it. And this is probably where a lot of you guys listening are. It's where most people are. It's where like I was for a long time during that college phase. And this is where a lot of people get overwhelmed because there's a wealth of knowledge out there, but so many things are opposing and you don't know what's right for you. And I'm again going off on a tangent on not what this episode is going to be. I could do a whole podcast episode on this. But anyway, that is where I just was for a majority of my time and just felt so overwhelmed and lost for so long. That was like most of college. This is again where you're like aware of what you don't know, and that's overwhelming in and of itself because it feels like so much. And I remember going through so many shifts where I'd be like, okay, I finally figured it out. And I'd get super excited and I'd like make these changes, and then nothing would happen, or I'd read something new and I would second guess the plan I had in place, and then I'd change it again. And I'd never actually see anything through enough to actually see if it was working because I was constantly overwhelmed with new information and trying to change it. And that was kind of that phase I was in my health and fitness journey for like 3 years. And it was super, super frustrating. But finally, like after weaving through all the BS, and this is why I want to, hopefully this podcast will help you guys save those 3 or 4 years that I had. I really freaking finally understood nutrition. Obviously I did a lot of my own education. I did a lot of prereqs for dietetic school. I did not end up going back because, honestly, I got a wealth of knowledge on my own. And then with my business, I was able to hire a dietitian. But yeah, I finally figured it out. And truly with figuring out and understanding how nutrition and the science of things worked, that just like changed everything for me and finally gave me so much confidence, finally actually allowed me to change my body. And the biggest thing is finally gave me food freedom. And that doesn't mean it's perfect. I do still struggle, sometimes with having to be really out of routine or not having control over things. But once I had the knowledge and understanding of nutrition, now I'm able to do anything I want with it. And I actually understand the truth and how it affects my body. And that was the missing piece for so long of all of those years, right? Like of late high school, of college, of early out of college. What was causing me either a really disordered relationship with food or like the anxiety as I started to kind of, the overwhelm when I was starting to try to fix it is just because I didn't freaking understand any of it, right? And I just think that's where it comes so much back to even being young and like our parents maybe not having that education either to kind of teach us. That's where I think like a lot of us just really struggle. And so anyway, I'm gonna kind of leave it there because I think that gives the big picture. I'm trying to think, like there was in the first record I did, there were definitely some things I mentioned that I think I forgot here, but that was also, I was 30 minutes and I'm hoping for this one to not be. But yeah, I mean, long story short, like it just really, I went from being a picky eater, never caring, flip switched, and it was a compulsion, an obsession. It caused so much anxiety. It affected so many of my times with friends, my relationships at the time. It definitely caused me to like lose friends, lose partners. And just if there's anybody listening to this and you are in that phase too, lean on your people for sure, but also take radical self-responsibility of, hey, it's not like it isn't fair to others around you to put all of your like weight on them of constantly validation, because that's what I was seeking all the time was like, am I okay? I mean, I even used to like call my mom and be like, is it okay that I ate this? Like, is it okay that I do this? And she would, I kind of think I said this earlier, but she'd always just say, well, you have to be conscious of what you eat, and she thought she was saying the right thing, right? But to me, that was the wrong answer and it would send me into a spiral, and people don't know what you need to hear. Like they can't read your mind, they don't know what the right answer is. And so kind of putting that weight on other people, it's a lot. So I really encourage you, if you're struggling, to acknowledge that you are and say, you know what, this work's going to be hard, and educating myself and learning it's going to be hard, but I'm going to do it for me and all of the people around me. Because that was what I really, really realized. And what was a big thing that inspired me and pushed me to like want to figure this out. And then of course, once I started figuring out just the way that empowers you and truly accelerates your life, that's what made just the major difference. So that is kind of my story. And that's, I think, going to be a good foundation for us going forward with the rest of the podcast. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will talk to y'all next week.